The Honourable, Ricardo Menéndez March.
Have to get the upgrade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, we're in support of this bill and we'll be voting in favour of it. We want to acknowledge the contribution from other people who have acknowledged how this has been a long time in the making, started by the previous government, and that overall the process to getting here has been quite constructive. The bill in and of itself will modernise 4 existing acts that relate to the operations of Parliament. And, I think most of this modernisation will enable our democracy to be more accessible, and it will also hopefully better support the entities that allow Parliament, and therefore actually the democratic system that we have, to be better resourced, and for its resourcing actually to be better scrutinised as well. And it will also make other changes around citizen-initiated referendums, etc., which I think will also pass some of those responsibilities to better and more adequate entities. I wanted to begin by making some reflections initially on some of the changes that will make Parliament more family-friendly, enabling more flexible travel arrangements, particularly for caregivers of dependents. I think this is an important proposal because basically one of the things that we've got still in this parliamentary system is that actually if you don't come from a place of wealth or privilege, actually there's a massive sacrifice that sometimes people have to make to even consider standing for Parliament, let alone imagining themselves being in Parliament. People who have caregiving responsibilities, who may have disabled children, face additional barriers, or maybe disabled themselves, face additional barriers to performing their duties as an MP. And having greater flexibility when it comes to, for example, travel arrangements will break down those barriers so that you don't have to imagine coming into Parliament from a position of privilege and wealth to then be able to make your caregiving and family arrangements work. So those proposals in and of themselves, what they will do is they will broaden the ability for people to be able to see themselves in this place, and it is absolutely a really positive thing. The other thing that I want to comment on is around the proposal changes to the funding model for parliamentary agencies. I mean, if we look at the legislative statement, I think it's really well summarised that parliamentary service and the Office of the Clerk are not part of the executive government, but they're agencies, but are the agencies that directly support the operations of Parliament. When we talk about the operations of Parliament, I go back to my earlier comments about how they're the operations of our democratic system. They enable, for example, the members of the public to submit on important pieces of legislation. A lot of the time they're the conduit between ourselves and the public when it comes to pieces of laws that we're passing. And having a better funding model that has more scrutiny, that is more removed from the executive, can only be a good thing because actually we're really strong believers that parliamentary services and the Office of the Clerk need to be better resourced to adapt to what are more complex needs and demands from constituents, and also to be resourced to be as accessible as possible to the public, particularly as we strive to make sure that a wide range of constituents are able to have their voices heard. And so I think this is really important. I think it's also in the interest of the public, not just as MPs, to make sure that we have a well-functioning parliamentary service and Office of the Clerk and that they're really, really well resourced. One area that I do hope we get a chance to unpack more in full at the select committee stage, and it's one of the few points of tensions that we have, is around the issues around how parliamentary security will operate, and particularly the additional powers that parliamentary security officers will be granted. And so I think there does need to be some scrutiny at the select committee stage to make sure that increased security powers, when it comes to the extent of these search, seizures and detention powers are appropriate, and that there's necessary safeguards, because once again, we want to make sure that we create a safe place for people to participate in our democratic systems, but that we also don't, in that pursuit of safety, make our parliamentary spaces one that feel unwelcome, one that may accidentally target specific groups. And that is one area that I do think deserves a bit more scrutiny, and that I would welcome members of the public who have had engagement with the parliamentary institutions to give fulsome submission so that we can consider those properly, and if we need to make changes, then we will just go ahead and do so. But I want to make heed to the workers in this parliament that make this place run, who provide us with the labour to ensure that we have a relatively functioning democratic system, and I look forward to debating this bill in full at select committee.
Relatively functioning.
Relatively.
Nice little stab there.
Yeah, it's but yeah, I think we're going to have to delve into the bill a bit more, because we'll see if we can get our viewers actually to bombard them with submissions for, positive reasons, critical changes. I mean, like they're talking about staffing here. I wonder if there would be staffing allocation for staff, that sort of thing there. Like, do we, because I do know, like, this is something that does happen with MPs, is EAs. So often you'll get a lot of areas where they have combined electoral offices in there, so they can have cover, say, 2 MPs in the one location to get around the fact while only having one staffing member. A common example was in Paraparaumu, when the Otahi electorate and the Mara electorate were both held by Labour. They had an office in Paraparaumu, 100 metres from the electoral boundary, for both MPs. So
they used to do the same in Kirikiriroa in Hamilton. The Hamilton East MP, Jamie Strange, and Nanaya Mahuta for the, I'm trying to remember the name of the
Hauraki Waikato.
Hauraki Waikato. They shared an electorate office in Hamilton West.
Is that along with Gaurav Sharma until he left?
No. It was like literally in the middle bridge in Hamilton, because I've got a couple of different bridges that run up and down the city. It was off the Claudelands Bridge, I think.
Oh, okay.
So it was literally across the river from Hamilton East, where Jamie's electorate was, but it was very strange.
That's interesting. Yeah, because they also had that when what was it called? When Nathan Guy was the MP for Otaki, he had two offices, and one of them was near the electoral boundary, and he shared it with Heke Parata when she was the list MP based in Mana. So yeah. Oh, let's see what Cameron Luxton has to say.